Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Doing fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, there's a little bit of good news,
Yeah.
with maybe some qualifications.
Yeah.
But the end of the world has not occurred.
Not yet.
There was a lot of excitement in the financial markets. The Federal Reserve Board chairman was talking yesterday, and markets did this and this, and I think there was a lot of confusion, but that's what one would expect when the Federal Reserve runs everything.
Everything, yeah.
And they have a philosophy that is unworkable.
Yeah.
So fireworks will continue. But what we want to start off with is a hearing that was held in the Congress, and it had the airlines there, and they wanted to come, the CEOs of Southwest and Americans, big airlines, and they decided they wanted to come and question the need for masks on planes. Wow, that's good. Where have they been?
Yeah.
But it turns out that I think they sincerely believed it. They probably were very handicapped over the years. They're getting ready to take their retirements in a month or two. Allows them a little more leeway to let us know what they're really thinking. And they've come to the conclusion, they seem to agree with each other, that the masks don't do any good.
Yeah.
Now, the airline hostesses, they seem to, this is an unsafe thing. They argued from a labor union viewpoint.
Yeah.
But I don't know why they do that. Why wouldn't they do it thinking, well, we want our jobs back. We want to make sure our jobs are good. Anyway, the big debate was on this, and they did some good testimony. They had the right answers for the mask not working. They declared this idea that they have a better filtering system.
Yeah.
That raised a question in my mind. I don't know the details of that filtering system. They only listed it as HEPA, but and it's supposed to be very, very good. But it's very, very hard and difficult to filter out viruses.
Yeah.
So, but of course we shouldn't say that, because people say, "Aha, we still have to be scared." They're not perfect.
Yeah.
But anyway, the airlines, as usual, just probably every one of them get subsidies from the government. I remember after 9/11, when the disruption occurred and the airlines were closed and it was all done for national security reasons, that some very, very hardcore conservatives said, this is an exception, and in a way, it wasn't the worst argument in the world. It was the government, that closed them down. But it's difficult to say, that justifies stealing from some other people to bail them out.
Yeah.
So it gets messy. Right now, that's sort of what's going on. These airlines probably have a lot more benefits and help in these past couple years with COVID. But nevertheless, this is very helpful.
Yeah.
For the CEO saying that you better question the mask. We have better filters, and there's no evidence to show that if you get on an airplane and fly and you don't wear your mask, all of a sudden you're going to die.
Yeah.
So we know about, and we spent a lot of time on how people spread it, and people who have masks on and have had the vaccinations, they're more likely to spread it than if they should have an airline that said, we want people who've never had a vaccine.
Careful,
that's
you're
the
going to get in trouble.
People we want to take care of. But anyway, positive news. I hope it gives people more courage, but there's always a few qualifying points that they're going to make.
Yeah. And let's put up the first clip, because we saw it on Zero Hedge. They get all the credit for reporting this first, although it's been around now. But I'm glad you brought up 9/11, Dr. Paul, because it reminded me of the great argument you made at the time when they wanted to put in the TSA and everything. You said the airlines don't want to kill their own passengers, They're going to take care of security better than the government because they have the incentive, and I think that can obviously also be said for the airlines. They don't want people to get sick and start dying in the aisles, and the airlines, the last thing they want. So they testified before Congress. And I think the important part about this, couple ones, first of all, as you mentioned, both of them are retiring, so they can probably finally say what they really think. But the second is the role of the federal government in these airlines. Because of the federal mask mandate, combined with all the money they've received from the federal government over the past 2 years, the federal government can say, hey, you want to keep the dollars rolling, you better do what we say and keep that mandate on. and that's what they want. So this is kind of a rare moment of them being candid. Southwest Airlines CEO Gary Kelly, he told the Senate panel on Wednesday, that was yesterday, the air in passenger cabins is so clean, face masks, quote, don't add much additional protection. The HEPA filters filter out 99.9% of airborne pathogens. And here's what he said. Here's the operative quote from the CEO Kelly. I think the case is very strong that masks don't add much, if anything, in the air cabin. The environment is very safe, very high quality compared to any indoor setting. And the American Airlines CEO agreed and said, yes, our planes are probably about the safest places to be. But as you can imagine, that freaked out people like Ed Markey, who we've cooperated with in the past, but this kind of weird COVID religion has turned people that used to be for civil liberties against them. Let's put up the second quote, and I'll just finish with this. This is what Markey from Massachusetts told them. I'm shocked that some of the CEOs here today have suggested we no longer need mask mandates on planes in the face of Omicron and children under 5 who still can't be vaccinated, that we would allow unvaccinated people on the airlines. He said it was immoral to suggest that people on planes be forced to sit next to the unvaccinated, unmasked passengers. He's not been reading the news because the vax is doing nothing to Omicron. We know that. We've talked about it. This is not even up for debate about it, so he doesn't know that. And also kids under 5, they don't even spread it. We know that already. So many studies. So typical member of Congress, totally clueless and brain dead, but totally devoted to the COVID religion.
Right. He's still accepting this whole idea that if you do exactly what the government tells you and you have your vaccine, you're going to protect. But that isn't the case. The people who have not been vaccinated and they want to play this game, they say, we will force your non-vaxxer to take it to protect me.
Yeah.
But if it was any good, it would protect them. And besides, the evidence is just piling up on the people who have had the vaccinations are spreading more of it than the non-vaxxers. They have a better immune system, especially those who have had the disease naturally. But back to this money coming from the taxpayers to the airlines company, it's a big issue of liability. Even before 9/11, they were running the security. They were in charge of security, and they didn't do a very, very good job. But the airlines always would go along with it because they weren't forced to do it, and they were getting this benefit, and the government pays for the security and also the liability.
Yeah.
If it were private, there'd be some liability, and that would give the incentive for them to really do a good job. Well, that's sort of the same thing here with the pharmaceuticals. Why is it that the pharmaceuticals are doing all these dangerous things and there's so much scientific confusion going on, but they're scot-free? No matter what happens, you can't sue the pharmaceutical companies. So that is pervasive, in government. It's a direct subsidy, but it also protects the companies from being sued, and that's why there's a coalition. And this has been going on a long time, which really we haven't talked a lot about that, because it's just in these recent years where you can see the corporations and governments doing this and this with the woke generation and all of this. So this is something that we have to deal with. But right now, what we're saying, the airline pilots are seeing a little bit of light for the moment.
Yeah, and if you didn't have these things forced on them, you mentioned the flight attendants, they're the worst. They used to have to serve people. Now they get to yell at people, and I've flown a few times under this, and they really seem to enjoy yelling at you. Put that mask on, and it's just sick. It's a sick thing in our society, I guess, but if they didn't have to force that on, then people probably wouldn't know that there was a pandemic out there.
It's a long way from the the early days of flight, where you see these pictures of the flight attendants taking care of people. It's say in the early years, the 30s and the 40s. Boy, it was a completely different attitude.
Yeah. Here's your peanuts. Put on your mask. Well, we want to talk about, because it's kind of in the same theme, the people that are really having panic attacks over Omicron. And now, of course, the universities. And if you look at universities, I don't think it's an accident that they're the biggest freaker-outers, but they also have these massive administrative costs versus how much they spend on educating students. 850 diversity officers and 2 professors is what it is. But Cornell, we can put up this next clip. Cornell University, they have shut down, Dr. Paul. They've gone completely online, even though they are, I think, 97 or 99% fully vaccinated. They've had an outbreak of COVID, and quote, virtually every COVID Omicron case at Cornell was among the fully vaccinated.
And the obedience factor comes in once again. I think the universities generally get a lot of money from the government. So that's the incentive to keep the benefits coming, and the leverage is there. At the same time, the momentum to ignore the type of science that we sort of follow, they continue to do the same thing over and over and get away with it. But I'm just hopeful that people in time will wake up. But this is ridiculous of what happens on how this university. Everybody was fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
Fully vaccinated.
With boosters, most of them. Yeah.
And it was much worse. But then you can lose your civil liberties if you say, well, do you have any idea what natural immunity means? Should that be a consideration in this debate? You're a heathen, and you're unpatriotic, and you're a jihadist, and you want to kill people. Exactly. Other than that, you're a good guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the funny thing. The scare is up front. Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever. It's even hitting the vaxxed. We got to shut down. And George Washington and a few other universities have done the same thing. They've gone all back to online. So basically, they've gone back to the stuff that hasn't worked in the past, and they want to do it again, and they're going to hope it works. But you go down, 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 and you read the fine print. And here's from an article in the Charlotte Observer, which we noted. Out of the students infected with COVID-19, the school has, quote, not seen severe illness as of December 14th. So all the kids are getting it, and they're not really getting sick. And nevertheless, let's blow the whistle, freak out, shut down the university. And guess what? The profs and all the administrators get to go back home and sit around their pajamas all day and get their salaries.
Well, just think of it. If we weren't into this situation where we're obsessed with this whole thing, and they said they didn't get sick, maybe they wouldn't have even gone to the dispensary. Maybe they wouldn't have even asked for a doctor's opinion. Maybe they didn't even need an aspirin. But they still, everybody's going to be tested because you could be a spreader of diseases if you don't get your shots. So it's the motivation to vaccinate everybody. And, just like the one congressman was disappointed. We can't even give this vaccination to the kids. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah, they're not the only ones. Moderna and Pfizer CEOs are looking forward. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about, I think, is something that really hits close to home. And I have some good friends in the Navy, and it makes me sick what they're doing. Let's put up the next clip. This is from Defense One. Navy to start ejecting unvaccinated sailors. And this really irritates me because, all these people love to say, support the troops, support the troops. It's just a bumper sticker, because when the troops are really under threat from their own government, you see so many people just completely silent, nobody speaking up for them. But there are 5,731 unvaccinated sailors in the U.S. Navy, and they're going to start kicking them out of the Navy because they haven't taken the vaccine. And I think it's just absolutely disgusting.
They have all kinds of arguments for why they're doing this. But one thing is, I think it attacks the very notion of having an efficient, powerful national defense. And even though we would question what that exactly means, but from the viewpoint of the people talking about it, well, yes, we should have a Navy. It's almost like, it reminds me of the stupidity of, and we've been critical of the police, the overreaction and the abuse that police have, but there's still a place for that. So but what do? They defund the police, and you say, well, what is going on? This is almost in that category, because I think that basically this can't help training. There's money involved in training people. There's people who might not volunteer because of that. They have beliefs. So it will change the nature of the military and the atmosphere of the military. How are they expected to, endure all the dangers that they're put through if they can't even make a decision on their own health and saying, well, I just don't think that I have to have this shot because of some certain beliefs. So it's not going to help national defense. It's going to be expensive, and it's just one more time, obey, obey, obey. And in the military, I imagine the number and the percentage of people who will obey will be a little bit higher because they are taught, to follow orders.
What you're going to do is you're going to get rid of any kind of innovative, independent thinkers. You're going to have an army, a military of drones who will just march off to get blown up when they're told to without thinking twice, which is exactly the opposite of what you need in a free society. But the other thing that struck me in this article, Dr. Paul, is the lies. Because what they say is, well, if you don't want to get the shot, just file a religious exemption, and we'll consider it. We'll give it good consideration. Here's from the article in Defense One. This service, the Navy received 2005 religious accommodation requests, but has not approved any of them. Not a single religious request for to avoid the shot. Everyone denied, blanket denial. And I think, and Thomas Massey has tweeted about this, that's, I think, a form of fraud, where they say, hey, you can, if you put your religious views out and you want an exemption because of it, we'll give it a good consideration. The reality is very different, automatically into the circular file.
So they go to the military, defend liberty and the Constitution, as they lose their liberties to even speak out and make a decision about their own body. So it is not good, but there's already a whole lot of people who have capitulated on this. But the news is still beneficial to helping sort this out, because if there were no examples of this, hey, you guys are making not a molehill, but no, I think more and more people, especially there's going to be a lot of military personnel who will be very sympathetic but can't speak out or chose not to speak out. But then there's a lot of members of, just think of all the family members, and yet they're expected, to be there to protect liberty at the same time they undermine liberty.
And they're going to punish them too, because they're going to force them, we talked about this on the show before, they're going to force them to pay back some of their training. They're going to put the knife in them even further. But the next story we want to talk about is really in the same context of what we're talking about today, because as the northern world has an absolute panic attack, and I don't even think it's a panic attack, I just call it a totalitarian attack based on Omicron, the place where it started, or at least where it was first recognized, because some people say it's been around a lot longer, but where it was first recognized is in Africa, particularly South Africa. They've had a full month of recognized Omicron, and guess what happened? They're not dropping in the streets, right?
But even before that, I'm fascinated with a report that came out 6 months or so ago. It said, the continent that has the least amount of infection is Africa, and they have the least amount of vaccination.
That's a problem for Pfizer.
And then of course, the next thing we heard was there was a vaccine being prepared for this variant and for Africa. Then all of a sudden, there was a breakout of a case, and it's coming, and it was blown out of proportion. Now they're kidding. Even the leaders in South Africa, it's not a big deal. We're not panicked here in this country, but line them up. They're all going to get a shot.
It's a lot of money. Well, the South African health minister has said that we've had a month of this stuff. And we're seeing it spread pretty rapidly through society, but the good news, and it is good news, is that we're not seeing a massive spike in hospitalizations and deaths. And instead of celebrating that and saying this could actually be the end of COVID, as several experts have said, as it kind of morphs into a cold, no, the totalitarians can't let that go. But I pulled this quote out, Dr. Paul, because I would say, why don't we look at this and compare this with the sayings of Fauci or any public health official in Europe or the U.S. Put up this next clip if you can. Here's the quote. This is South African Health Minister Dr. Joe Fala. He says, quote, according to scientific studies, the virus is spreading quicker, this is Omicron, than in previous waves, but the rates of hospitalization and death remain low. He went on to tell South Africans they should practice reasonable safety measures and avoid super spreader events, makes sense, but that the Omicron variant should not prevent, quote, a joyous Christmas, a prosperous New Year's celebrations. The country will also remain on level 1 restrictions, which is the lowest level. When would you ever hear Fauci say, go out and enjoy Christmas? Be a little careful, be cautious, use your common sense, but go and enjoy yourself. They can't do that.
So it comes from a place that most people wouldn't expect to hear the good news of that. But, you know, this example that we're talking about in Africa, when I heard about this, well, this is good because they can be used as the control. You know? But you know, if you give vaccines now, there's no control. You don't take 1,000 people and nobody knows what they're getting. And then you compare the ones who had the vaccine or had the placebo. But here it's natural. They didn't want to do it. They haven't done it. They hadn't received it. And why couldn't you could find millions of people that could qualify in Africa, but you know, the accusation will be that's encouraging people not to get their vaccine. So you guys are bad people. You're tricking them into avoiding the vaccine. But I think it would have been a good chance to learn a lot more, but I think there's some learning, but it's slow coming. But we certainly had some good comments from the president of South Africa.
So we want to move on to one more final thing. This is more in your realm than mine, in the economics and finance and corruption.
Oh, so you don't care about this one, huh?
I do, but you're more of an expert than I am.
Well, this is a little weird. I'm going to laugh a little bit.
You should.
But it's still pretty serious because it really touches on the whole principle of morality and ethics and promises, and it touches on hypocrisy. This is a story about this famous speaker, the famous speaker that we currently have in the House of Representatives. Speaker Pelosi rejects the idea of congressional stock trading ban. They want to stop members of Congress from trading. Well, they have a right to trade, and that's what she says. And she claims that, quote, we're a free market economy and we should be able to buy and sell stocks. and she's done pretty well. You know, the evidence is out there. But that's her husband. But her husband, they don't talk to each other.
No, I'm sure.
So anyway, it is so bad. And then I get to thinking, well, what do you do with this? Because they have a lot of information. Does that mean when I was there, actually I probably didn't buy or sell anything, but when I was in Congress or anybody in Congress, they might own some stocks. What if they decide to sell something? And it's unrelated to anything that they do, you know? So I don't see it. The automatic answer is that nobody in Congress is allowed to buy or sell a stock. But I think there should be some monitoring. Matter of fact, there is monitoring because I think I had to send out a report every year or maybe even less than that and say what you've bought and sold. And of course, if you're involved in something like that in one of your committees, you have to reveal this. But I was thinking, how would we handle this in a more libertarian society? Well, the libertarian society doesn't work very well if you don't have morality and principled people in the Congress, and you don't have very limited government. So there would be fewer opportunities and better people there, and maybe they'd make better judgment. But that still doesn't solve the whole thing. There's there's no thing like perfect solution with perfect people. That wouldn't happen. But what you could do is rather than giving a report at the end of the year and Nancy Pelosi doing whatever she wants, what you could do is have some sort, if it was controversial and even came close, if I'm on the banking committee coming close to buying and selling bank stocks or something like that, maybe you should have a prior approval or something. But it's a little more difficult. But when I kept thinking about this, no matter what you do on the regulations, everything, if you're going to have people who want to cheat the taxpayer, just think of all the things that they just legalize. I mean, you say, well, you're worrying about this little thing here of buying and selling stock. What about stealing? Does the Congress steal and pass it on to somebody else?
Yeah.
So it's a different story. That's the bigger picture of having a moral society.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to just do my closing with a couple of absurdities that I noticed over the past day. And let's put up that next clip if we can. I know you're going to get a kick out of this, Dr. Paul. You know, the crime is everywhere. You can see people parking to go shopping downtown and their trunks were open. You think, what's going on with that? This is ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Amid a spike in vehicle break-ins, some Bay Area car owners have been deliberately leaving their trunks open in an effort to avoid forced entry by thieves. They don't want their cars smashed up, so they just say, come and get it, right?
I wonder if that would work. I don't think that's a good solution. I think we need more honest people. Well, we need a little bit a better system where when people steal and rob, including politicians, there should be penalties. Because if you don't penalize people from doing bad things and you reward them for doing good things and legalizing bad activity, that I mean, just think of the breaking into the stores and everything that's been going on. There's no penalty.
Yeah.
And they get excused. Technically and legally, they're excused. Oh, you didn't steal enough. That's not a crime. So if you subsidize, what they're doing is criminality, guess what? You get more of it.
Yep.
And that's what we're facing today. So we have a long way to go. I unfortunately believe in a scenario that what's going to happen is when we run out of stuff and we run out of a market working, when the financial system continues to deteriorate, which I believe it's in the early stages of doing that now, because everybody's income is going down. It's going down not because people have less money, it's because people have a lot more money, but they don't have purchasing power. And it's getting worse. And there's a lot of these predictions right now about inflation, and that's why the criminality is going to continue. Soon there will be no more stuff the government can steal.
Exactly.
So plan ahead.
Well, here's this next clip, and this is the Moderna CEO. You can tell he's probably pretty nervous because people aren't dropping in the street from Omicron. In fact, all the reports, as we've talked about, are good news that it's not hurting people. Well, he is not having any of that. No way. Here's what he says. Omicron and Delta may strike people at the same time and combine to create an even worse COVID variant in the coming weeks, Moderna boss warns. So go and get some of my products. The final thing is a video clip, and just play that first 17 seconds if you can. This is, I did this 2 days in a row. I'm going to get punished, Dr. Paul. I hate to end it on a bum note, but this is New York City. A bunch of people wanted to go out and have dinner at Applebee's. And guess what? The cops showed up and arrested them because they didn't have their vax passports. Let's watch a few minutes of this. A few seconds.
You have no rights. No rights at all.
And this is what you guys do.
No freedom and no rights.
Arrested on one charge. Did anybody read that?
No, I was not read my rights.
You don't need Miranda rights when they witness stage.
My rights.
This is bullshit.
Yeah, that's probably enough. Yeah. The crime here is eating dinner without a vax passport. Meanwhile, crime, as we've talked about on the show, has skyrocketed across the country. The cops aren't busting people who are busting people. They're busting people who are eating at Applebee's.
Oh boy, good they're protecting us.
Feel safe.
You know, on dealing with this and getting people to do the right thing, I was thinking when you were mentioning that you know, they're not going to advise taking vitamin D or getting into sunshine or zinc. There's not enough profits in that, but they have to go through this other ritual and make up stories about the great danger. But how many times, you probably have an idea, but how many times has the CDC, especially Fauci, have changed their tune, said one thing, and then changed it later on? And nobody, you know, the media, the so-called regular media, they don't really ever bring that up. They never mention, say, well, you just said this. Sometimes in an interview, he'll flip in the middle of an interview. And yet we have found from our audience that is one of the things that they get most aggravated by is the inconsistency and the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And that's good. As long as people still get annoyed with outright hypocrisy, I think there's still hope that truth will break out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm all done, Dr. Paul.
Okay, very good. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today because we're certainly pleased that we have a chance to spread some of our message on liberty because to me it's so important. We've been doing this for several years. And the biggest job we have is to make sure that we present the evidence that we have, both good and bad, in the best manner possible. We recognize immediately that our presentations can't be perfect because man is imperfect, but I think we can reach out to a lot of people and emphasize the fact that lying, as politicians do, outright so for personal gain, is easily identifiable. I think that's something I discovered in campaigning, that young people especially were very much aware of the fact when politicians would say the same thing as others and they could tell the difference on who was telling the truth and who wasn't telling the truth. So I think that is the message of practically the history of mankind, is sorting out the truth from fiction. And I think everybody has something in their heart and mind to seek truth, and some not. There are a few that become nihilists and they become the dictators. But I tell you what, our numbers are greater. Our efforts have to continue to expand because our numbers can have an influence on those people who have grabbed power and are now passing out the mandates wholesale around our country. So the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is to come to the belief that liberty can solve our problems, and there's no reason in the world that we can't continue the momentum in that direction. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.